we start, as usual, with a question that's come in from our family joining us from all over the world. Our beautiful online community. And then we'll open it up to any questions that anyone here has, because we get so many from those joining us from all over. So since they can't be here physically with us on the banks of Mother Ganga, we take one of their questions first, and then any questions that any of you have, we'll open it right up to that after. How can I open my third eye? So, this center, this energy center, this chakra, that's called the Ajna Chakra. And it's the energy center of the power of discrimination. Meaning not discrimination in a negative way, not like discriminating against people on the basis of their color or their race or their religion or their body shape, but rather discrimination as in truth from falsehood. And so these two eyes see form. They're very, very good at making sure that, when I get down from satsang, that I don't step over the little step stool that I have, or that when I walk in this direction, I don't walk right into the tripod of the camera, or that I don't fall over on this table. They see form, and they're very, very, very good at that. They immediately recognize people of different sizes and shapes and colors. They recognize objects in front of us. They enable us to literally navigate our way through our lives. Otherwise, people who are blind, people who can't see, have a very, very difficult time navigating without a cane, without somebody helping them, where objects are in their world. So these two eyes see form, shape, color, movement, light. These are the sorts of things that they can see. But in order for these eyes to be able to see, the object I'm looking at has to be at least somewhat far away from my eyes. Right? If I hold something up, if I took this page of questions and I went like this, well, I can't read them. I can only read them if I hold them a little away from my face. So these two eyes require that the object I am looking at and knowing is separate from myself. That it is outside of myself, that it is an arm's length or half an arm's length away. Only then can I see it and understand it. But what about the self? What about the divine? Well, those are not an arm's length away. They're not even an inch away. They're the truth of who we are. They're in us. But these eyes can't see that. Because there's no shape, there's no form, there's no color, there's no movement. These eyes can't see them. And when we look at other people, these eyes can only see the form of that person. What color is their skin? Are they tall? Are they short? Are they fat? Are they thin? But it can't actually see content. The content of the person is what we call divinity, or soul, or spirit. But these eyes can't see them. This eye can. That power of discrimination is the power to discriminate truth from falsehood. What these eyes see is considered falsehood, meaning it's not that you aren't actually a tall person, or that you aren't actually a skinny person, or that you aren't actually a fair-skinned or dark-skinned person. But it means that isn't actually the highest truth of who you are. The highest truth of who you are is soul, is spirit, is one with the highest truth of who I am. These eyes see us as separate. See, this is my form here, that's your form there. We are separate. But that's considered falsehood, because actually we are one. And so we need our third eye, this Ajna Chakra, to show us truth instead of falsehood, to show us spirit, soul, divinity, instead of just body, to show content, essence, instead of just form. So this is why we meditate, we pray, we do yoga exercises to open the third eye. There's a lot of ways. Number one, when you meditate, a lot of meditative practices have us close our eyes and literally focus the power of sight. Now the eyes are closed, so I'm not actually seeing something, but I'm taking that power of sight and I am focusing it onto my third eye from the inside. So a lot of meditative practices will tell you to look up to the third eye. Why? Because that directs the energy of the being into that third eye. Whatever I'm looking at, that's where my energy goes. Try it. Notice it in your life. Just turn your head and you notice as you turn your head and your eyes, all of the energy of you goes suddenly now to whatever you're looking at. Well, if you turn your energy to the third eye, if you turn the power of sight to the third eye, then all of your attention and intention and that Shakti goes to that eye. And slowly it opens. Practices of yoga, not just yoga asanas or yoga kriyas, but actually as well yoga like Jnana yoga. Literally meditating upon what is truth. Who am I? Ko hum. Who am I? Am I the body? And the more we meditate on what we are and realize what we are, the more that third eye will open on its own. It can be opened in a moment by the grace of a guru. It can be opened in a moment by a powerful spiritual experience. People have third eye openings in powerful spiritual experiences, whether it's being in the arati, whether it's having a powerful meditation, whether it's being in the presence of an enlightened master, of a guru. Whatever it may be. It happens spontaneously as well. There's another meditative technique that I teach sometimes where as you meditate, normally when we breathe from in, out. So whether we do it in the chest, you see my chest is going like this. Then we bring it down to the abdomen, but most of us still do in, out. So abdominal breathing tends to be kind of turning the abdomen into kind of a balloon, It expands and then it contracts. And that's wonderful for calming yourself down. If you're ever upset, stressed, getting yelled at by someone in a very difficult, challenging moment, just do that abdominal breathing, in, out. But if what you want to do other than just calm yourself down is actually awaken yourself, then instead of it being in, out, the breath actually rises up. And you can actually practice carrying the breath from a place called the Ajna Chakra, which is about 2 inches below your navel. And as you inhale, you just allow that breath to rise, gently carrying it. It's not a pranayama exercise. It's just a directionality of the breath that rises up. And you carry it up here to this third eye center. And then you let it go. And it's a beautiful meditation practice. Just as you inhale, allow the breath to rise. So instead of going outward, the breath is going upward. And if you can't carry the breath all the way up on an unbroken and smooth inhalation, don't worry. Just you carry it as high as you can and then let it go. But even if the breath only comes to here or here, here, keep that power of intention, that power of the mind's eye here on this third eye center. So even if the breath isn't actually getting all the way up, you will be able to do it, by the way, if you practice it for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months. Eventually you'll actually be able to carry the breath all the way up. But even until then, as long as the power of intention and attention is there, slowly that eye will start to open. But the other really important aspect of it is sometimes our own psyches, our own unconsciousness keeps it closed. Is there something you don't want to see about yourself, about others? Are you attached in some way to seeing yourself as a body, as a story, as an object? Are you attached to objectifying the world? Are you scared to realize that you are actually one with the divine, that you're not your story, you're not the body? If that brings up fear for you, well then that eye is going to stay closed to protect the ego. If the ego's inside shouting, no, 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 I don't want to see, well then it'll stay closed. So if you notice that you're really working to open the third eye and it's just not happening, ask yourself, how might I actually be sabotaging this? You know, it's like with these 2 eyes. You ever have an alarm go off in the morning and you lie there in bed knowing you have to get up, and no matter what you do, your eyes just won't open, right? You're like, I'm trying here. They just won't open. Now, obviously, they would open. If suddenly somebody yelled, fire, your bed's on fire, immediately your eyes would pop open. So it's not that you've actually lost the physical ability to open the eyes. It's just there's such a pull of inertia that's like, stay asleep, that you literally think you cannot open your eyes. Right? I mean, how many times do we say, I tried to get up, but I just couldn't open my eyes? Well, in the same way it happens to us on a spiritual level. It's not that you can't open it. It's that maybe there's a pull inside, a pull toward that same inertia that just wants you to stay in the status quo of how things are, seeing yourself as just an object, just a body, just a story, so you can keep getting all upset over the 2 pounds you gained or the 2 pounds you lost that you didn't want to lose, so that you can keep getting upset about pimples or wrinkles or gray hair or who's saying what to whom. There's an inner inertia. And if you're going to allow that third eye to really open, you have to be prepared to actually then walk that truth. Like when you actually open your physical eyes, you have to be prepared to put one foot in front of the other today. And yeah, sometimes it's easier to just stay in bed and keep the eyes closed. So spiritually, we have to make sure that we are prepared, willing to actually have that eye open as well. There we go. Questions? Yes.
If you're subconsciously closing your eye, how does your ego get out of the way, and how do you open it if you are self-sabotaging?
Great. So if we are self-sabotaging and subconsciously keeping that third eye closed, how do we open it? Inquiry into the self. The same way that if you were self-sabotaging in any other way, you'd look at yourself and you'd look at what beliefs am I holding on to? Because our beliefs are really the core of our self-sabotage. So for example, if I believe that I'm a failure and I'm stupid and I'm worthless and I don't deserve anything, then I'm going to make sure that I don't actually achieve anything. I'm going to be one of those people who may do great up until the end, and then I just can't complete anything. And maybe I go to a therapist, maybe I ask a spiritual master, maybe I ask a coach. I don't know what it is. I'm right there, just about to complete, and somehow I just can't bring myself to complete things. And that therapist or coach or spiritual guide might talk you through, well, what sort of beliefs are you holding on to that actually successfully completing something would render incorrect? And this is the same thing. What beliefs am I holding on to about my own self? See, if I believe that I am this body and I'm walking through the world with a story that says, I'm not happy because I'm dark-skinned in a world of people who only like fair skin, or because I'm a woman in a world where we are discriminated against, or because the shape of my body is not the shape of the body that our society deems beautiful. Therefore, I am not happy. Well, it's going to be really hard for me then to realize I'm not my gender, I'm not the color of my skin, I'm not my body. I am soul. Now, I'm not saying discrimination doesn't happen, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't work against it. We should. On the level of us as human beings, trying to co-create an equal, sustainable, peaceful planet Earth for everybody. But on the level of my happiness, on the level of my peace, on the level of my own internal experience, as long as I am attached to the fact that it has something to do with my physical body or my physical story, I'm not going to want to let go. I need to believe that I am that which has happened to me. In my life, I spent the first 25 years of my life convinced that the reason I was not able to be really happy was because of that which I had experienced, because of the struggles and challenges and trauma that I had gone through, that which I had been a victim of or a survivor of. Either way, it's just a semantic difference, but the point is, either way, that is the reason why I am how I am today. And a lot of us have stories like that. And they serve as crutches. I am the way I am, unable to be happy, peaceful, in love, successful, unable to share my gifts, unable to fulfill my dharma, unable to know the truth because of something to do with my physical body or my story that the physical body has been through. And so the last thing I want to do is realize, oh my God, that whole thing is falsehood, because then I no longer have an excuse. It's like when Pujya Sadhviji said to me, you're going to take that story to the grave with you? And he told me to give it up, to just give it to Ganga. Well, I had spent most of my 25 years having that story as the story of who I am, why I am the way I am, why I suffer the way I suffer. Suddenly, you give up a story, and there's no more excuses. Now when the question is, why aren't you free? Why aren't you in joy? Why aren't you in peace? You have no other ready-made excuse. And so that's a big reason why a lot of us do that self-sabotage of not opening the third eye, because then I wouldn't have any more excuses. If I really want to live my life in lust, in greed, if I'm committed to the idea, the belief system that says that happiness comes from having more and acquiring more, and so I've dedicated my time and my energy and my resources and my brain to just making as much money as I can make, to getting as high on a social ladder or a career ladder as I can, or to having, as much sensual pleasures that I possibly can. Well, then I don't want to know that I'm not the body, because then suddenly that undermines my entire way of living. It undermines all of that I think about, that I focus on. I mean, if I'm not my bank account, if I'm not my popularity, if I'm not my career, if I'm not my body, if I'm not my followers on Facebook or TikTok or Instagram, well then who am I? And that's a scary place for a lot of people to go. And so you've got to be prepared to really kind of drop into the void, because you don't know what it's going to show you. But you know what you're letting go of. And there's so many others, but I'll give you one other really common and powerful belief system that keeps a lot of us stuck is loyalty. Loyalty to parents, loyalty to teachers, loyalty to culture that ingrained in us the idea in some way that we are our bodies. Whether it was an emphasis on what we looked like, whether it was an emphasis on how much money we made, what type of career we have. The idea of somehow having experiential, undeniable proof that which they told me is not true. that can feel like a really big betrayal. There's a sense of almost, how dare I prove that what my parents or my teachers or the culture I grew up in dedicated their entire lives to actually was false. And that's where it's really important to realize that it's not a betrayal. They were doing the best they could. You know, I mean, when I was a little kid, my mom took me to McDonald's for, Egg McMuffins for breakfast. She thought that was healthy. That's what, as a young parent in the early 1970s in America, that's what they were told. Healthy breakfast, Egg McMuffin. As the years went by and she got more and more information about actual health, eating habits in the house changed. But it's not that it would somehow be a betrayal of her to realize that Egg McMuffins, you might as well be eating, paint thinner. But it's an awareness that they were doing the best that they could with the information that they had. And we are not meant to spend our lives continuing to prove that which was false to begin with. Time moves forward. Time moves forward. And so, whether it's knowing the truth about what's healthy, whether it's knowing the truth about whether the sun revolves around the earth or the earth revolves around the sun, as time changes, that which we consider truth changes. But that's an important thing for us to look at, because a lot of us do have that sense of betrayal. Oh my God, if I don't live like this, live the way that I was taught, I'm somehow disrespecting their memory if they're no longer here, or disrespecting them if they are still here. And that isn't true. The purpose of your life is not to continue to prove what someone else believed to be true. It's to see your own truth. It's why we've all been given eyes. So keep working with it. And you'll notice as you work with it, as it starts to open, just be really aware of what fears are coming up. What's arising for me? And just see it and notice it. But keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Other questions? Any questions? Yes. Yes, you. There's a mic here. Just a sec.
So you had mentioned with parents or figures in your life negotiating the fact that they were doing the best they could. What about reflecting back on ideas or habits or things that you used to or maybe still do, and negotiating the fact that you could always do better and you're never really achieving your full potential? I feel like I struggle with that feeling of shame, which kind of then blocks me from changing the habits.
Beautiful. So as we look back on ourselves, we see how we weren't living up to our full potential at every step of the way. Creates shame in us. And so, of course, then we don't live up to our full potential today because, well, I've already wasted all of this time. Right? It's like you decide you're going to go on a diet and no cookies, no sugar at all, and then you have half of a cookie and decide, oh, well, anyway, I mean, the day is ruined. I might as well eat the whole bag. right? Because there's such a sense of, well, I made that mistake, therefore the day is ruined. No. You're learning and growing. Your potential today is different than your potential was a year ago, or 5 years ago, or 10 years ago. But you're looking at that self with these eyes. And so we assume that at that time I could have done better. I should have done better. Because if you were in that situation today, you could do better. But we don't realize what situation I was in at that time. It's very hard to go back there experientially and realize that. Let's imagine I plant an apple seed today, okay? I plant it in the dirt, cover it up with dirt, I start to water it. So in a few weeks or months or however long it takes, a little sprout comes out of the earth. A few months later, sprout's a little bigger. Slowly, over a period of the next 3, 4, 5 years, that sprout actually becomes a tree. And eventually I get an apple. But for me to look back on it when it was a sprout and somehow feel like it was failing in its duty to provide apples, well, that's not fair to the tree. It didn't have the capacity to give me apples as a sprout. When I look at it as a tree, I think, my God, I can't believe I've waited so long. This is so unfair. I should have had apples from the beginning. But the sprout has no capacity to give apples. It actually has to go through the whole transformation and growth in order to be able to give apples. In the same way, the you of 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago wasn't ripe the way you are today. You pick a piece of fruit off a tree before it's ripe, it's sour, it's gross, it's hard, you can't eat it. It requires its time. Premature babies frequently don't even survive. Could you imagine if somehow we criticized that baby, a 4-month baby, for being unable to survive or being unable to survive without an incubator? Well, it needs the full 9 months in the womb in order to be able to survive on its own. It doesn't have that capacity from day one. It gets it as it goes along. There's actually a beautiful story of a man who walks out of his house one day and he sees a cocoon hanging on a branch. And there's a little crack in the cocoon and a butterfly's head has just started to push through the crack in the cocoon. And the man watches for a while and he notices that the butterfly seems to be really struggling, unable to push its way out of that small crack in the cocoon. So the guy decides he's going to help out the butterfly, and he goes into the house to get some scissors. And really gently, really carefully, he goes in and he just cuts the cocoon, careful not to cut the butterfly. And he just cuts the cocoon in such a way that he opens it up for the butterfly. And the butterfly falls right out of the cocoon, splat onto the ground. And the man thinks, what happened? And he goes down to pick it up and he tries to get the butterfly to fly. But the butterfly can't fly. Its wings are soaking wet and shriveled. And it turns out that actually it is the act of pushing itself through that slit in the cocoon that sends the fat, the masses of the center part of the caterpillar's body into the wings of a butterfly, enabling it to fly. But if some good Samaritan comes by, meaning well, and cuts you out of the cocoon, and you don't actually have to push your way out, you end up with wings that can't fly. They're still wet and shriveled. But would you look at that butterfly and say, oh, why can't you fly? So that's what you're doing to yourself. You're looking back on a former, earlier version of yourself and saying, why couldn't you do what I can do today? But then you're taking it a step further and you're essentially saying, I'm not going to do what I can do today because I didn't do it years ago. And that's something you've got to look at. Is who told you that you are unworthy? Who told you that you are not deserving of total greatness? Where did you get that false belief that says, I somehow, first of all, I am to blame for my smallness. I am to blame for my inabilities. And it is, in an unconscious way, kind of my duty to perpetuate them. To fulfill the prophecy that someone made directly or indirectly, or that you internalized in some way, that said, you're not going to make it. You're not made of the good stuff. Where'd you get that? Because it's totally a lie. But you got it somewhere. And now you are perpetuating it to make sure that it comes true. So that you don't have to go back and re-examine that belief. The next time that shame arises, picture yourself. Picture yourself yelling at a little child for what she couldn't do. And immediately you'll feel even more shame. You'll feel embarrassed, like, how dare I yell at a little child? And then realize that's exactly what you're doing. Yelling at a child. You're yelling at a sprout for not giving apples. But now you have the capacity. And so now it is your duty to utilize that. Whatever we've been given, it is our duty to use it sincerely. This is Bhagavad Gita 101. It is your duty to stand up and embody the fullness of who you are. And that doesn't mean that you're going to be elected president or prime minister of a country or a company. Doesn't mean you're going to be rich. Doesn't mean you're going to be famous. Doesn't mean any of those things. It just means that there is a unique and special you-ness that you are here to fulfill. And that potential may be in business, in entrepreneurship, in politics, or that potential may simply be to be the one who everyone can count on for a smile or a kind word. To be the one who plants the mango trees that the next generation is going to eat mangoes from. To be the one who quietly just walks along the banks of Ganga and picks up the trash. No sign, no megaphone, no live Instagramming, but who just does it. Because that's what you do. So it's just about ensuring that who you are is allowed to flower and blossom. Not expecting it to smell like another flower or look like another flower. Not judging it based on how other flowers look or smell. But just being aware that there is a unique you-ness and a very special you-ness. And you're here to experience that. And to just allow it. Like the earth allows the apple tree to blossom next to the rose bush, next to a sunflower, next to a blade of grass, next to rye or wheat. Each looking different, smelling different, having a different gift to the world. But the earth just opens herself for all of their different sprouts. And in the same way, we open ourselves to whatever it is that's going to sprout and blossom through us. And that's all you're called upon to do, not to rewrite history. If you were supposed to go back and redo it, life would have a rewind button. But since it doesn't, you can be pretty sure that we're not meant to do that. And since we can't go back, you can also be pretty sure that spending too much time looking back doesn't make a lot of sense. If there weren't a reverse in a car, a rear view mirror wouldn't make much sense. It makes sense so that when we are headed in reverse, we can see where we're going. But if we can't reverse, why bother? In the same way, we can't go back. So all of that time that we spend looking back is mostly a waste. Look forward. That's where you're going. And let yourself blossom and flower into that very unique and exquisite fragrance that only you have. And that has taken all of these years to refine itself. And now you share it with the world. Have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your evening. A beautiful morning and day to our family joining us from all over the world. And I look so forward to being together again. We'll join again. Well, let me take a quick poll before we decide that. If you are staying in Parmarth Niketan ashram, raise your hand. Okay. If you will be here tomorrow evening as well, raise your hand. Okay, so we'll have satsang again tomorrow. Done. The government has closed it for outside people to be able to come in. Definitely from tomorrow, but I think from today as well. So as long as you're all staying in the ashram, then we will gather for satsang again tomorrow evening. Wonderful. I look forward to seeing you all again tomorrow.